what we're looking for here when we get out to these practices, it's important to remember it's not like training camp where we get a linear look at what they're doing, because we're going to see one day and then they'll practice 2 or 3 times that we won't see. So it's not, whoa, last time we were out here, this guy wasn't playing and now he's repping with the starters.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you have to keep in mind that there's certain days we're not there, and that's probably when they're doing some of the more important stuff. So, keeping that all in mind, these are non-padded practices as well. It's mainly install. Bill Belichick used to refer to this as the teaching portion of the offseason, the instructional portion. The competitive portion comes later once the pads come on in training camp. But that doesn't mean there's nothing to glean here. You mentioned I have some takeaways up or some things to look ahead to on 98.5, thesportshub.com. But the big thing for me here in all this is, and we can kind of repeat this take from this time last year, but it's a new coaching staff, and we're going to kind of get to see how they operate, what a practice looks like. There's been a lot of stories about how hands-on Mike Vrabel is and all of that. Now he's calling players out. We saw a flash of that at rookie minicamp, but this is going to be a more formal setting, a more involved setting, a more crowded setting. So, like, big picture, before we get into any of the individuals, this is our first look really at how this new look coaching staff runs things.
Yeah. So like you said, Barth, it's a new coaching staff, but it's really like truly a new era of coaching in Foxborough, because Gerard Mayo was sort of a continuation of Bill Belichick and, the way he ran things for the most part. It wasn't, not that it was all exactly the same, but Gerard Mayo learned everything he knows about coaching in the NFL from Bill Belichick. Mike Vrabel does not fall into that category. I think it's very important for people to understand that. I'm not saying they don't, but Mike Vrabel never coached here before. He only played here. He's coached under Bill O'Brien, who has some connections to the Patriots, but he has a completely different connection to around the league as far as coaching is concerned. So what I'm interested to see is, how does it look? How does it sound? How does it feel? Not that it's going to be radically different from what we usually see at an OTA or an off-season practice in the NFL, but this is truly ripping the Band-Aid off, starting fresh, starting from scratch. I think moving on from Joe Cardona, the long snapper, was the last piece of that Patriots dynasty.
The last one, last one here who won a championship.
And so, and obviously you have some holdovers on the roster, but there's no more connection to that Brady Belichick dynasty era Patriots. And so this is truly a new era, and I'm very interested to see how different it looks, if it feels and sounds any different with Vrabel out there.
I mean, we already saw them running a couple of drills at rookie minicamp that I hadn't seen them run here. They ran this sort of modified Oklahoma thing where it obviously wasn't live tackling, but, offensive and defensive players starting backs to each other about 20 yards apart in a tunnel of players. And, they ran toward each other and the offensive player to make the defensive player miss and things like that. So that can always be cool when it's a new coaching staff, or we see this sometimes in joint practices as well. Just when you get a look at a different coaching staff, that there might be different drills or things like that we're not accustomed to seeing. Like with Bill Belichick, we kind of knew what they were going to run through, and they would add different things here and there as they brought in new coaches. But like with Gerard Mayo, especially on the offensive side of the ball, really where it was the Alex Van Pelt show and guys that were not a part of this tree, we saw them do some new things. And I'm expecting, with Josh McDaniels, there'll be some familiarity, but some on the defensive side of the ball, we might see some new stuff. And even with McDaniels, he's talked a lot about how he took a year away last year, kind of used that to refocus himself and how he sees the game differently. So what does new look Josh McDaniels look like? Will we get any indication in these practices?
Yeah, I'm more interested in Vrabel specifically because we sort of have an idea of Josh McDaniels. Like maybe he'll be a little different after going through college programs and seeing how they operate. Maybe he operates a little differently out there, but it's Vrabel that I'm interested in, obviously, because he's the head coach, but how hands-on is he? How instructive is he?
You want to see him with the pad on.
Want to see if he's getting up the pad, say, Will Campbell, knock me on my ass, please. I liked it. But yeah, like, what's his instruction like? How vocal is he? Like, I'm interested to see that. And I honestly, Barth, like, if you go back and you watch some old Titans practice videos, I think from training camp or mini camp or something like that, I know it's only like, an isolated video clip. It's not necessarily the whole practice, the whole picture of it. But honestly, Vrabel struck me as surprisingly positive and upbeat in these practice settings. Like, he's been compared to Bill Parcells with the way he's communicated and things like that, but I don't see him as this guy that's like going to be going around screaming at players if they do something wrong. Like, I feel like he's been pretty good at bringing the guys together and like sort of lifting them up in like sort of a more positive way. And so, not that we're going to have Vrabel mic'd up and we're going to be able to hear every word that he says on the field down there, but it's going to be open to only us. There's not going to be fans there. We're going to be able to hear some of what's going on. Not that we'll be able to report that, but like it's just going to be interesting to see exactly how he approaches things on the field. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was surprisingly positive. I don't expect him to be out there yelling and screaming, but I do expect it to be a different approach from what we've been used to seeing over the past quarter century.
Well, there's some. I think he can be. What's the word I'm looking for? I think he can be critical, but it's a very player's way of being critical. Like
he'll needle you a little bit. He won't.
Yeah, I think it's more, hey, you got to be better than that. That sort of thing. And I mean, he'll go up and hands-on coach guys. We saw it at rookie minicamp, but I think he's not just going to be like, hey, you effing suck, get off the field. You're not going to see that from him. I think if there is a little carryover from Belichick, there is some of that dry sarcasm. That you might see, but I don't think he's the kind of guy that's really going to, at least not in public, like chew a player out.
And he's not going to absolutely insult them in the press conference like Parcells would, but like Terry Glenn and things like that.
So Milton Williams, was it last week, right? Told the story about how during one of the early workouts, wasn't an official practice, but they have workouts in the spring. They're running, it sounded like they're basically running gassers and, all right, you had to get to the goal line and back to the starting line in X number of seconds. And he knew he was going to be back in time. So he started to pull up and he said, Vrabel called him out, said like, you need to be you need to set the standard here. And he said that in front of the whole team. So I think that's kind of what it looks like. It's not necessarily, F you need to be better. It's, you can do better at this. Your expectations should be higher. My expectations for you are higher. So you should work harder to meet those expectations, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think it was probably wrapped into a whole idea of like, I know you can do this. I believe in you. And so I have this expectation of you, but I know you can do it. And so that's the expectation I have.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. Again, it's pretty much a whole new coaching staff. The only people that are left are on special teams, and these are not really special teams practices. They're not padded. So I am looking forward to see what they're doing with some of the tweaks to the kickoff, but that might have to wait until the summer.
I'm waiting for training camp for that sort of thing.
The kicker battle, I think, although, who knows? So last year, the kicker battle didn't really start until the summer. They didn't really kick field goals in the spring.
Yeah.
Maybe this year it's different. Also, this year it's not as truly as much of a battle, but
yeah. And I guess to my point, like it could be totally different because this is Mike Vrabel. It's not really a carryover from Belichick to Mayo.
Yeah. Well, there's some things that have to be similar, I think, just by nature of it being non-padded practices.
Sure.
But, so one thing last year with Mayo, for instance, from day one, it was heavy team periods. It was a lot of 7-on-7s. It was a lot of 11-on-11s. It was a lot of 11-on-11s. There really wasn't a lot. Like they would do the individuals very early in practice, right? Or the positional drills very early in practice. And they wouldn't really go back to it. Once they got going about half an hour in, and that includes stretching and all of that, it was, all right, we're going to line it up, offense versus defense, and we're going to go. And it made for very entertaining practice. How well did it work? Well, they won 4 games. But that's something where, like, is Vrabel going to be as heavy on the team stuff? Is there going to be a lot more individual? Is going to be more individual because it's the spring and we get more in a team in the summer? Like, that's the kind of thing we'll be feeling out.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to feeling out how the offense is sort of set up and the walkthrough nature of it. I'm looking for the intensity level. In particular, I want to see, like, is this a very light walkthrough period that they're going to do here? Or is he going to be ramping up the intensity? Is he going to be, getting on the guys like, hey, we need to get off to a good start here. We need to hit the ground running because we can't have another 1-3 start. Right. We can't have another 4-13 season. So is there going to be urgency? I think that's what I'm going to be looking for.